solving linear equations in one variable. An equation has an equal sign. How do you know it's linear? If it's linear, all exponents are equal to 1. Now, when the exponent is equal to 1, it's usually not written, so x to the 1 is equal to x. Y to the 1 is y. If the exponents are not equal to 1, then it's called a non-linear equation. What does it mean for the equation to be in one variable? Well, very simply, it means there's only one variable in the equation. So 2x plus 1 equals 7 is linear because the exponent is equal to 1. It's in one variable because there's only x. The solution is one-dimensional, meaning there's just one part to it. And it turns out this type of equation only has one solution. In contrast, a linear equation in two variables has two different variables. This one has an infinite number of solutions, and each solution is two-dimensional, meaning it has two parts. So, for example, when x equals 0 and y equals 5, that's a solution. Or when x equals 1 and y equals 4, that's also a solution. A linear equation in three variables has three different letters. It also has an infinite number of solutions, and each solution has three parts. And each solution is three-dimensional. We don't have to worry about this now. Let's focus on a linear equation in one variable. So how do you solve it? Your goal is to isolate x, which means you want x all by itself. And you must follow this rule. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side to maintain equality. All right, let's try some. If x plus 3 is equal to 5, what do? I like to think of it in terms of the opposite operation. What's being done to x? It's being increased by 3. So we do the opposite of adding 3, which is subtract 3. And remember, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other side to maintain equality. Well, plus 3 and minus 3 make 0. So we get x equals 2. X is being increased by 7. What's the opposite operation? Subtracting 7. And you have to do the same thing to both sides of the equation. Plus 7 and minus 7 make 0. So that leaves x by itself. Minus positive 19 and negative 7 make 12. In this one, we have minus 3. What's the opposite of subtracting 3? Is adding 3. So we get x equals 20. In this example, x is being multiplied by 3. What's the opposite of multiplying by 3? Dividing by 3. And remember, you must do the same thing to both sides of the equation. So we get x equals 5. 0.2x equals 4.2. Don't worry about decimals. They're just numbers. So we divide both sides by 0.2. We get x equals 21. If you have negative x, that's a coefficient of -1. We want to get x by itself, so we divide both sides by -1. -8 divided by -1 is 8. Let's do some examples with 2 steps. So there's 2 things being done to the x. It's being multiplied by 2 and then increased by 1. So we do the opposite operation in the opposite order of the order of operations, which means we do add, subtract first, and then multiply or divide. So the opposite of adding 1 is subtracting 1. So we get 2x equals 6. And then divide both sides by 2. Again, we do the add, subtract first. So the opposite of subtracting 2 is add 2. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other side. So we get 3x equals 12. And now the x is being multiplied by 3. The opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. Don't worry if the x is on the other side. It doesn't matter which side x ends up on. So we do the add, subtract first. The opposite of adding 3 is subtracting 3. And then we divide both sides by 2. For the next 2 examples, let's recall that addition is commutative. So you can trade -7 and 3, and you get 3 minus 7. So when you trade these, remember that that negative belongs to the 2x. So this is plus 7 and minus 2x. So this is negative 2x plus 7 is negative 13. Let's do the add, subtract first. So the opposite of plus 7 is minus 7. So we get negative 2x is negative 20. And then we divide both sides by negative 2. We get x equals 10. Again, it's not required, but don't forget that this minus belongs to the 3. That means the 5 is positive, and you can trade them. Can make the problem easier. We do the add, subtract first. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. I get negative 3x is negative 21. The opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3. X equals 7. Simplify each side of the equation before doing anything to both sides of the equation. For example, combine like terms as long as they're on the same side of the equal sign. So 3x and 2x are like terms. They're on the same side of the equal sign. So we add 3x and 2x to get 5x. These are unlike terms, so we've simplified it as much as possible. Now we can subtract 5 from both sides. And then divide both sides by 5. Solve for x. So we have unlike terms on the inside of the parentheses. Those cannot be added. I have a factor on the outside, so I'm going to distribute. So that's 5x plus 5 minus 4x equals 2. These are like terms on the same side of the parentheses, so I'm going to combine those. 5x and negative 4x make 1x. Remember, if you have 1 times x, you don't have to write that 1. And then we'll subtract 5 from both sides. We get x equals negative 3.